Hello, and welcome to my storytelling space. A story is waiting. Join us. Come in. And now, if you're ready, the tale will begin. The Elves and the Shoemaker. Once upon a time, there was a poor shoemaker who was having difficulty making ends meet. No matter how hard he worked, he didn't seem to be able to sell enough shoes so that he and his wife could live happily and not at times be hungry. Well, there came one day when all he had left was one piece of leather, just enough to make one pair of shoes. And so he sat down and he cut out the leather into the pieces that he would need to put together and stitch and to make into a pair of shoes, and then he retired and went to bed, very sad and thinking about what might happen if he could not sell these shoes. When he woke up in the morning, he went in and he looked, and there in front of him was a completed pair of shoes. The leather had been taken somehow and made into the most exquisite pair of shoes he had ever seen. He picked them up, he looked at them, he looked at the stitching that was around it, and he was amazed. Well, he put them in the window of his shop and he waited. Well, a customer went by and looked and thought those were the most magnificent shoes he had ever seen, and so he came in and he paid even more than what the shoemaker was asking. That gave the shoemaker enough leather to buy to make two pair of shoes. And so he sat down that day and he cut out the shape of all the things that he would need in order to make two pair of shoes. But that took all day, and so he went to bed that night and he slept, and intending to get up in the morning and go straight to work. But when he got up, he called his wife and they looked, and there were two pair of magnificent shoes, as wonderful as that first pair. Well, they looked at each other and asked each other, how could this happen? But he took them and he put them in the window, and customers came by and they looked at those shoes and they came in and they paid handsomely for those two pair of shoes. And so it went on. That day he went and he bought enough leather for 4 pair of shoes. And he spent the day working carefully, cutting out the leather, getting everything ready, spreading it out on his workman's table so that he could get up early in the morning. But after he and his wife went to bed, something magical happened. Sure enough, when they woke up, there were 4 pairs of shoes. And again, he put them in the window, and customers came and bought them and paid more than what he would have asked for it. And it went on, night after night after night. And as it came close to Christmas, and he and his wife were sitting at the table, he said, we have become very comfortable and we are not hungry anymore, and we don't want for anything. And I have learned how to make these shoes by looking at what has been made and appeared in the morning. We need to find out who is making these shoes. And so he and his wife decided that they would stay up that night and watch. And so they lit just a little candle and they put it up and they hid behind the curtain and they waited. And they waited. And then suddenly there was a bustling movement, and when they looked out, there were 2 little elves there. And they looked around and saw the leather that had been spread out for them, and they quickly went to work. In a twinkling of an eye, they had 1 pair done. In another twinkling of an eye, they had another pair done, and so on until they had 7 pairs of shoes all lined up, looking absolutely spectacular. And then they quickly left. Now the shoemaker and his wife looked at each other and they said, but those little elves had only ragged clothes on, and it's so cold, and they have nothing on their feet. We must make them some clothes, said his wife. And the shoemaker said, and I will make them some shoes. So that day, the shoemaker and his wife went to work, and they stitched up shoes, and they stitched up clothes, and some warm pants and warm coat for each of the little elves. And that night, the shoemaker took the 2 tiny pairs of shoes and put them on the table. And the wife took the clothes that she had made and she put them on the table. And they went and they hid behind the curtain. And they waited. And then suddenly there was a bustling, and in came the 2 little elves. And they wanted to work, but when they saw those clothes were there and the shoes were there instead of the leather, they quickly put them on, and they danced and danced and danced around on that table. They were so pleased and so merry with what they were now wearing. They would be warm, and as quick as lightning, they disappeared. And the shoemaker and the wife smiled at each other and went to bed. Now the next morning, the shoemaker got up, and he took his pieces of leather, and he began to stitch and work on his own shoes. And from that day forward, they had many customers buying the shoes that the shoemaker was making, and he and his wife lived happily ever after and never wanted for anything again. That is the tale of the elves and the shoemaker, and that is a tale from Germany. There are forms from different countries as well. So I hope you enjoyed that, and until the next time, bye-bye.